Imagine a world teetering on the edge. The global economy is trembling, international rules are getting shredded, and one country's actions have pushed everyone to the breaking point. And all of this leads to one massive and frankly dangerous question. What if the rest of the world just decided to boycott America? All right, let's get into it. So that's the core question we're tackling today. Can we actually survive without iPhones, without Google, without the US dollar propping up the whole system? We're going to put emotions aside and just look at what the numbers and the source material tell us. Is a global boycott a legitimate form of protest, or is it just economic suicide for absolutely everyone involved? Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in a hypothetical 2025 where a whole new set of US trade policies have basically lit a match and thrown it on the global economy. And look, this isn't just a fight between politicians. This is the kind of thing that directly hits your wallet and shapes your future. So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll look at the policies that started this whole mess. Then we'll dig into the very real human cost. After that, we'll analyze the absolutely catastrophic consequences of a global boycott. And finally, we'll talk about the impossible choice the world is facing. So you might be asking, how in the world do we get to a point where boycotting the planet's biggest economy is even a conversation? Well, it all starts with a few key policies that really shook the very foundation of global trade as we know it. The source material really zooms in on a specific set of US trade policies, and it all kicks off with something called universal tariffs. So let's break down exactly what these are and why they've caused such an incredible global backlash. Okay, this slide really lays out the three main moves that sparked the fire. First, you've got the universal tariffs. We're talking a blanket 10 to 20% tax on everything coming into the country. Then there's the use of the IEEPA Act, which is basically an emergency powers law that critics say is a huge overreach in a simple trade dispute. And on top of that, these tariffs were slapped on close allies like Canada and Mexico, which could be a direct violation of their own trade deal, the USMCA. Now, that first point about the tariffs is so important because it allegedly blows up this principle right here. The most favored nation rule is like the golden rule of the World Trade Organization. Think of it as a no-playing favorites policy. It's the bedrock that keeps trade stable and predictable. A universal tariff just completely ignores that. And this really gets to the heart of the fallout. You see, it's not just about money and products. The source argues that these moves have destroyed something way more important: trust. The moment countries feel like international agreements can be tossed aside whenever it's convenient, the whole system of global cooperation starts to crack. Now let's see how this snowballs, because this isn't just some abstract debate for economists. The source material draws a direct line from these policies to real, tangible, human pain, arguing that this crosses the line into actual human rights violations. Here's the chain reaction, right? It's pretty simple. Step 1, tariffs make raw materials more expensive. Step 2, companies now have to pay more to make their products. Step 3, guess who they pass those costs on to? You, the consumer. And the end result, step 4, is a wave of inflation that always hits the poorest families the hardest.
And according to the source, this economic squeeze is seen as a violation of basic human rights. We're talking about things like UN Article 25, the right to a decent standard of living. The argument also stretches to other areas, from border policies that impact the right to seek asylum, all the way to tariffs on green tech that could hurt the environment for generations to come.
And to make this super clear, look at this example. The US is a gigantic market for clothes and textiles. So if new tariffs suddenly cut off access for, say, Pakistan's cotton industry, that's not just a statistic. That means thousands of real people, real workers, could lose their jobs, pushing entire families into poverty. Okay, so facing all of that, the world starts considering its nuclear option, a full-scale global boycott. But as we're about to see, this proposed cure might just be way worse than the disease itself. First off, let's just talk about the US dollar. A whopping 80% of all global trade happens in dollars. So if a boycott tanks the dollar's value, it doesn't just hurt the US. It sends a financial tsunami across the globe, wiping out the economies of countries holding massive dollar reserves. And what about America's closest allies? Just look at this. The US and the European Union are completely intertwined. They are each other's #1 trading partner. A boycott isn't some surgical strike, it's mutually assured economic destruction. You're talking about factories shutting down all across Europe. And it goes so much deeper than just goods. I mean, stop and think about your day for a second. A boycott means cutting ourselves off from the tech that literally runs our lives.
No more iPhones, no more Windows software, no Google search, no Boeing planes to fly on. The source suggests it could literally set global development back by decades.
And what about a global powerhouse like China? Its entire manufacturing economy is massively dependent on selling things to Americans. A boycott would be absolutely devastating. It would cripple their exports and could easily lead to mass unemployment.
And it's the same story for big South Asian economies. Key sectors like clothing and IT services, which are so reliant on U.S. customers, would be completely gutted. Remember those workers in Pakistan we just talked about? They would be the very first ones to suffer.
And let's be real here. America is not just going to sit back and take this. The most likely reaction would be to double down. We're talking even harsher tariffs, crippling sanctions, or maybe even flexing its military muscle. The conflict would spiral out of control, not get resolved.
But out of all that chaos, a new world order could rise from the ashes. Because power vacuums never stay empty for long. You could see nations rallying around other blocs, like the BRICS countries, and really speed up the push to trade in their own currencies, a process they call de-dollarization.
Which brings us to our final section, where this all comes to a head. The world is well and truly caught between a rock and a hard place, staring down an impossible choice. This slide really says it all, doesn't it? On one side, you have the goal: challenge policies that are seen as deeply unfair and damaging. But on the other side, the cost of doing that is unleashing a global economic tsunami that would drown everyone. So, at the end of the day, here's the bottom line. The source concludes with this incredibly stark warning, calling a boycott economic suicide. It's a powerful way to say that this isn't just an attack. It's a profound act of self-harm for the entire planet.
And that leaves us, and you, with the final, critical questions. Faced with this impossible dilemma, is the world truly prepared to pay that price? And maybe more importantly, is a boycott really the only option left on the table? The answer is dangerously unclear.